Good Monday morning. Thank you for joining us here on KARE 11 News Now. I'm Jason Hackett. Let's get to your headlines. And you're going to need to pay attention to the weather today. Most of our region has a shot at severe weather with a chance at heavy rain, high winds, hail, and even tornadoes. Our weather team has issued a KARE 11 weather impact alert day for basically the entire day. So make sure you stay with us here on KARE 11 Plus and KARE 11 News Now for the very latest on these storms. We're going to check back in with John in just a little bit. At this hour, emergency officials across our region preparing for the incoming severe storms and encouraging you to get ready as well. Raya Katene has a look at what they're saying.
A pleasant weekend in the Twin Cities could turn into an ugly start to the work week.
I'm usually the guy who stands and says, don't get up on the ledge, we're going to be just fine. This is shaping up a little different.
The possibility of severe storms, strong winds, and the potential for tornadoes are all things Judd Freed is keeping a close eye on as the director of Ramsey County's Emergency Management and Homeland Security.
People have this tendency to overreact when they should relax and underreact when they should be nervous. And I don't want anybody to be nervous, but I'd like them to pay attention.
As he and his team prepare for the worst case scenario, he also wants you to prepare yourself and your loved ones.
Doing a few small things to prepare can really make a big difference. For example, make sure that all of your devices are charged, and just in case, write down some important phone numbers on a piece of paper. You also want to identify a safe space in your home. Ideally, it's an interior room like this bathroom on the lower level or in the basement of your home away from windows.
Freed also recommends keeping your phone close by for weather alerts from a trusted source and listening for outdoor warning sirens.
If you do hear those sirens, stop what you're doing if you're outside. Start looking for some shelter and find out what's going on.
And if you're on the road,
stay in your car. Don't go running. Don't jump into a ditch, right? That's not really what we want you to do.
Freed suggests taking the nearest exit or seeking shelter in a parking garage.
Go around it this way.
And never try to drive through flooded roads.
It would be foolish to not at least take it seriously enough to talk to your family. Put together that plan. Use this as the drill that you probably didn't do on Severe Weather Awareness Day, right? There's a possibility of it actually happening.
Great advice there. Always good to stay weather aware, especially on a day like this. Okay, more of your headlines here. Breaking news this morning. Russian President Vladimir Putin just announced a unilateral 3-day ceasefire in Ukraine. So the truce will be from May 8th to May 11th. The dates coincide with World War II commemorations. Now, Putin called on Ukraine to do the same as well. Russia has previously rejected a U.S. proposal for a 30-day ceasefire that was agreed to by the Ukrainian government. This morning, President Trump is back in the U.S. after Pope Francis's funeral over the weekend. The president is preparing to mark 100 days in office on Tuesday as he tries to lock down one of his first-day promises. NBC's Bianca Fascini has details from Washington.
President Trump back stateside after the funeral for Pope Francis in Italy over the weekend. Trump had a behind-the-scenes meeting in Rome with Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky that both described as positive.
We want to continue such meetings to bring peace to Ukraine.
In photos released by the Ukrainian government, the two are seen talking closely, as well as speaking with other leaders from the UK and France. It's a noted change from their last in-person meeting at the White House in February, which ended with Trump calling Zelensky ungrateful. The president will hit the road again Tuesday, hosting a rally in Macomb, Michigan, while deportations and court rulings continue to dominate the headlines. Meanwhile, Tuesday marks 100 days in office for Trump, whose approval rating is sinking. An NBC News Stay Tuned poll shows 55% of Americans disapprove of the way he's handling the White House. He's being hit especially hard on his economic policy, with 61% disapproving of his tariff plan.
It's all coming down. It's all looking good. The tariffs are strong.
The numbers come as stock market turmoil and recession fears plague anxious consumers, already wary of inflation. Now, President Trump is expected to mention easing inflation during his rally in Michigan on Tuesday, though the latest consumer price index shows it remains virtually unchanged from the start of the year. In Washington, Bianca Fascini, NBC News.
Developing right now, global shipping company DHL says it will restart shipments worth more than $800 from businesses to consumers in the U.S. Earlier this month, DHL temporarily suspended those shipments. The company said the move was due to a, quote, significant increase in red tape at customs following the introduction of President Trump's tariffs. DHL says those custom regulations have been adjusted after, quote, constructive talks with U.S. officials. New this morning, the Vatican says the conclave to elect a new pope will begin on May 7th. That date was decided today after cardinals met behind closed doors for the first time since the funeral of Pope Francis. The conclave will take place in the Sistine Chapel, and only cardinals under the age of 80 are allowed to vote. If a candidate receives 2/3 of the total vote, he will become the next pope. Once conclave begins, all eyes will be on the famous chimney above the Sistine Chapel. The ballots are burned after every session. White smoke means a new pope has been elected. The last two conclaves lasted only 2 days. If you have a GM SUV or truck in your driveway or garage, listen up here. According to General Motors, it's recalling over 800,000 2021 to 2024 Chevy Silverado and GMC Sierra trucks, along with several full-size SUVs. This is all because of a defect in their 6.2-liter V8 engines involving the connecting rods or crankshafts. This could lead to engine failure and sudden loss of power. The GM issued a stop sale on the affected models until they're inspected and repaired. So if you own one of these vehicles, you'll be notified by GM with the next steps. Well, starting today, prosecutors in Hennepin County are being asked to enact a very controversial policy. They'll be required to consider race when offering plea deals. This is all part of a new policy from County Attorney Mary Moriarty. Lou Ragoose is here with details.
This is a new negotiation policy set to go into effect Monday in Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty's office. In it, Moriarty lays out several considerations, including race, that her prosecutors should take when extending plea deal offers to defendants. The policy says proposed resolutions should consider the person charged as a whole person, including their racial identity and age. While those factors should not be controlling, they should be part of the overall analysis. Prosecutors should be identifying and addressing racial disparities at decision points as appropriate. KARE 11 News provided a copy of the policy received from sources in the county attorney's office to University of St. Thomas law professor Rachel Moran, former prosecutor Imran Ali, and U of M constitutional law professor Jill Hasday. Ali says he understands confusion expressed privately among prosecutors about whether it means race should be considered when proposing a prison sentence.
Our law, our sentencing guidelines that we have that the criminal justice professionals use every single day in court says that race should not be used in that calculus. This seems to contradict our sentencing guidelines.
Moran believes the policy was carefully written to avoid the Equal Protection Clause of the U.S. Constitution.
I definitely think that some people will get worked up about the issue, but I don't see a constitutional problem. And that's specifically because the policy tells prosecutors to avoid racial disparities, not to create them.
Hasday reads the policy as contradictory.
It both says don't take race into account, presumably because of the constitutional problems with taking race into account in addition to potentially political objections. But it simultaneously says this is something you should consider.
And because of that, Hasday believes the policy could face constitutional issues, even if it was intentionally written to try to avoid them.
The problem for the drafters of this policy is once you take race into account, it doesn't really matter what else you say. The policy is going to be struck down.
Moriarty declined an on-camera interview and didn't answer specific questions regarding potential constitutional issues. But in a statement, a spokesperson wrote, in part, this policy acknowledges that there are many factors to be considered in negotiations. A defendant's race matters because we know unaddressed unconscious biases lead to racial disparities, which is an unacceptable outcome. A 2-year budget deal deadline is now just 3 weeks away. The Senate, with a very narrow DFL majority, approved 5 budget bills so far. The House, which is working under a power-sharing agreement, has passed 3 budget bills. The sticking point here for both parties is health care. After the House and Senate pass their budget bills, the 2 chambers will need to come together in conference committees to work out their differences and then finalize legislation that Governor Walz can sign. If they don't meet the May 19th deadline, Walz would need to call a special session to avoid a government shutdown by July 1st. Make sure you stick with us. John has more on today's severe weather that's coming up right after this break.